Fabulous with Vips and Vicki. The ThinqShift podcast for professionals who aspire to be fabulous leaders. Those who not only succeed, but also purposefully seek to reinvent the world.
Welcome to the Be Fabulous podcast, episode 10. Vicki turns the table on Vips and probes into the Vips why. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to episode 9 of Be Fabulous. In this episode, we are going to continue exploring our whys. In the last episode, I got to tell my story, and in this one, I get revenge. I get to interview Vips. Beware, Vips.
Revenge seems like this is exactly how I feel right now. I'm tense.
Relax into it, my friend. So I know our listeners are super curious as to your why and why are you doing what you're doing. We know a little bit more about why I'm doing what I'm doing. But why don't we start with your younger years, Vips, growing up in London to Indian parents. Tell us a little bit about your story growing up.
I trust you to go right to the heart of it, right to the beginning. Well, I grew up in London. In a place called Archway, North London, which still not perhaps the nicest part of London, although the areas around it have been gentrified nicely right now. But it was a very urban environment, and it was very close to the tube station, very multicultural, but it was raw. It was raw. I do remember. Overall, I have nothing but fond memories of Archway. But I do remember when I was younger. It's very topical right now. It did feel like quite a racist environment. I was only the, I think, one or two, Indian, Asian kids in our school, let alone in our class. And, I used to get, people walk past you and scream "Paki" at you and spit at you and stuff like that, which was, I have to tell you, I think about it more now than I ever did then. It was just what you accepted and moved on. But, but grew up very loving family. We were, very, very humble place. Three sisters growing up. I had the baby. In Indian families, it's a big deal when you're the son. And I was like, the son after 3 failed attempts, so they had a son. My sisters will laugh when they hear this. But it was definitely an aspect to that. So I was spoiled rotten, basically, by not just my mother and father, but also by my sisters, who, one of which old enough to be my mother. So,
what is the age difference between your sisters and you?
Elder sister and me, I think, is 16 years. And 16, then it would be 12, and then it would be 8. To put it into perspective for you.
So they really were trying for a son.
Or it was an accident. Who knows?
Or they'd given up trying.
Who knows? But what is interesting though is they used to call us the Kenyawala, which basically means the people from Kenya. Okay, so my dad and my whole family really, they spent many years in Kenya. They only came to London in, I think it was 71, and I was born in 73. So I don't have that sort of Kenyan birth, if you like.
So your sisters all had that as their early part of their...
In Nairobi, they were all born in Nairobi. Fair amount of schooling in Nairobi too. My dad had a shop in Nairobi too. He was an upholsterer. He used to restore, amongst other things, antique race cars, like leather trim, like hand stitching leather trim inside sports cars. He was a real craftsman, superstar performer who never grew up.
So Vips, if you had been born in Africa, we would have had that in common.
I know. We would
have been Africans together.
We would have been Africans together. Might never have met though.
But Nairobi in South Africa. Yeah. I don't know where to go with that really. I guess it was we went to, I went to the local school. It was a state school. I'm guessing you're some kind of troublemaker.
My troublemaking years were more secondary school. I wasn't really a troublemaker in primary school. It was a bit of a goody two shoes really. Yeah, just getting by really. I was lucky though. I was one of these people who was just good with exams. So I didn't really have to study so hard, but I also didn't read much, which now makes perfect sense. 40 years later or 50, 35 years later, finding out you're dyslexic. But at the time, we didn't know. So
how did you get by? Because there's a certain amount of reading that school systems pride themselves on.
this is true. And I think what I used to do was just figure out how to read like only the bits that really mattered. So I guess I guess what in today's language you would say a good skim reader. For me, skim reading is the only reading because it's so painful. So I just got quite good at knowing how to read the beginning of paragraphs and the end of paragraphs and judging whether there was something in there that required me to read or just move on. So I learned algorithmically, really. Now that I think about it, I learned how to get by using rules rather than by getting good with reading, which is weird because everyone in my family is readers. Everybody, my sister used to, she used to have a different book in her dressing gown, a different book, there are books everywhere in our household, but that wasn't me. I was, Probably was more like how do I get the most of what I need by doing as little as possible? I probably fell into that category.
And did very well off that. And how would your sisters describe you as a youngster at that age?
Strong-willed, caring, but sometimes just inconsiderate, I guess. Spoiled, maybe spoiled again. Perhaps spoiled again. I used to get a lot of all the things that you get that we never had, and it's because you're the boy, you're the son. It never quite. I don't think they ever quite relate to the fact it's because we were just probably a little bit better off, we're richer.
Living in a
something
different
to do with
country.
it too. But so it's kind of all relative. But,
and then when your dad was in England, he did some really interesting work.
Oh yeah, my dad, he came over, they had to leave with virtually nothing. So he left behind his business and everything. It was one of those, come to the country with £5 kind of stories. And when he landed, he started working in Peter Jones in Sloane Square, which Peter Jones became part of the John Lewis. But I don't think it was at the time. And he was an upholsterer. So
I remember Peter Jones. It was very prestigious.
Yeah. It's still there, I believe. He was basically an upholsterer for them. So he used to, do loose covers and armchairs and curtains and this kind of thing. And just basically as an employee. And then there was a lady, her name, I remember her well. Her name was Miss Bravo. And she, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's kind of like before I was born, she kind of took a shine on my dad and told him he should go and do his own thing. Like, be his own single shingle or one-man show, if you like. And so he did, with the support of really my mum. My mum was the strong person in our family. My dad was not, from that point of view. My dad was a hard worker, but he wasn't very good with difficult decisions, whereas my mum was very, very good with difficult decisions. But she wanted, hold on, I got to tell you the story because it's funny. So she wanted to be my godmother, right? And then she was a very, very rich, aristocratic woman. And so, but they wouldn't let her be my godmother because my parents didn't know what being a godmother was. And that wasn't an Indian thing, right? That was a Christian thing. They didn't understand it. So apparently when I was born, Miss Bravo sent like a pram and a bassinet and all this really, really high-end stuff. And I could have been silver spooned right at the beginning because she wanted to be my godmother, but my parents said no. And therefore I grew up relatively poor when I could have grown up rich. Oh, well.
Did you ever get in? Did you ever get in touch with her?
I didn't, because by the time I found out about Miss Bravo, I was a lot older. I think she passed away. So
Perhaps you could have got into her will.
Maybe I am. Maybe at some point some lawyer will turn up and say, "Hey, someone bequeathed you something. We just didn't know your name or something." I don't know.
Now your dad had some famous clients, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did some stuff for Bob Geldof. He did some stuff at the Palace, the real Palace.
The Queen.
Yeah, I don't think he met her, to be fair, but yeah, he was a craftsman. So the thing was, if you're restoring a $10,000 chair and you're taking the tapestry off and you're putting the same tapestry back on and using the same upholstery nails, I mean, this is meticulous stuff. It's it's not
true
production
craftsmanship.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Yeah, I remember that was so funny. People used to want him to do this work. So we used to, when we grew up in our house, like they couldn't get it done by anyone else. So this furniture used to come to our house, like an armchair or something. And we'd have it for a year, 2 years, when it would just become part of our furniture. It's like, Dad, are you ever actually going to do this? Are you going to actually? And it was, he wasn't one of the most organized of people. But his clients, they tolerated it. Well, what are they going to do? They can't get it done anywhere else. But it was funny. It was, now thinking back, I mean, seriously, there was one sort of armchair cum sofa, like a love seat, that we must have had for about 5 years. just like it's part of our furniture.
It shows you the power of a truly unique proposition.
Yeah. But he and we used to be like his, like when people used to phone, right? He was always out or working or whatever. So we used to basically be his secretaries, right? Me and my sisters. And so we used to just have to deal with people screaming. It was like being in a call center or a
Good
banking
experience.
environment. Yeah. But it was always, he's not there right now. Will you get him to call? I will ask him to call you. She goes, you should know. I used to end up just saying, look, I'll ask him. I'll write it down on notes. I'll tell him tonight, but I have no idea if he's going to call you back or not, because he was a true craftsman, right? He artist.
Yeah.
He did what he wanted to when he wanted to. And you either liked it and you could live with it, or you didn't like it and you'd go somewhere else. But no one ever did, would seem. So
It's amazing. So what about secondary school? You hinted at perhaps you weren't as much of a goody two-shoes in secondary school.
Well, secondary school is a bit about survival. I went to a pretty bad school. I mean, so bad that it's now closed down because there were too many people like getting killed.
Boy.
It was rough school.
Inner city London school.
Inner city London, Roman Catholic school, I hasten to add. But to be fair, I mean, nothing but good memories. I met, Carla, my wife.
When you guys were 11, right?
When we were 11, yeah, we weren't in the same class that year. But then what happened? What they did after the first year. So in the UK, you start at 11, secondary school, 11 age. And that first year, we were in different classes. And what they did was, this school just got lucky. Apparently, there were enough kind of like semi-bright kids that they decided to make one class of us from the second year, which is when we were 12. And from that year onwards, Carla and I had basically been in the same class as well. But that was, in retrospect, I think we were really lucky, because we got lucky that there were just enough kids who happened to be pseudo-sensible, so they could create a class of like 25 kids. And we were mischievous and we were downright horrible, but still with good intent. Whereas the rest of the classes were just horrible with no positive intent. So yeah, we used to get ourselves in trouble. We used to arrange fights between the two local schools, and just stuff that I'm absolutely mortified to talk about right now. And it was there was an incident with one of my classmates getting hold of a gun, which don't come so easily in the UK. And yeah, fortunately, we managed to stay out of police trouble. But we used to do terrible things, Vicki. Like, do you remember Camden Lock? Mm-hmm. Oh, we used to go at lunchtime and push people into the canal.
That is terrible. I don't know why I'm laughing.
I mean, no one ever drowned or got seriously hurt, but it's not very pleasant if you
just bump up into.
Yeah, like just random strangers. It used to be like a dare. Hey, there's someone. I dare you to push this person into the. That's terrible. I mean,
and then you'd run away.
Yeah, of course. What else would you do? I know there's a whole bunch of listeners who think I'm this horrible person now, but it was pretty. I mean, to be fair, it was pretty horrible. I guess at the time though, Camden wasn't what it is now, and it was,
It was rough.
I don't think anyone in Camden at the time was particularly nice anyway. So it was probably a karmic thing where anyone who was there kind of deserved it anyway. So, or at least that's how I reconcile it in my head. But yeah, we used to do some pretty not things I would be happy if Jay got involved in.
But you wouldn't be able to say anything because you did them yourself.
No, I would plead ignorance that I was never involved in any such thing.
Let's hope Jay never gets his hand on this episode.
I'm sure he will at some point.
And then after school, Vibs, where did that take you next?
So miraculously, we all survived our school, St. Richard's, alive, and I was lucky. I basically got accepted into the London School of Economics. I think the time was different. I really do believe that we experienced something when I was growing up was probably like the end of when there was something that resembled equality of opportunity when it came to education. I really feel like that changed even after I graduated, and it's probably got worse since. But at the time, or maybe it was because I was from an ethnic background and didn't have enough, non-white kids applying to the LSE, so I got accepted or whatever. But I got accepted. I did good grades in my A levels, and or good enough grades in my A levels, and I went to the LSE, and it was cool. Made some really, really good friends. Economics and politics. So I think they called it a BSc Econ in government, but because everything at the LSE has got an Econ.
Yeah, what led you to study those?
I was kind of stupid. Is that the only way I can describe it? Like everything about growing up, I was always a hobbyist technologist. I got my uncle to buy me my first computer, a VIC-20, when I was like 11 or something, and I learned how to program myself back when you had to write in assembly, and all of those sorts of things, and it was just for fun, just out of curiosity. So, but there was something about me when I was going through high school, or what we call high school here, secondary school, and A levels, where it's like I could do anything that's mathematical in nature, engineering, math, science, but it would just be too easy, and to this day I think, what an idiot. But it was I want to do something I find hard, and so. In my head, it was, I always found English hard. Yeah. So I should do more essay-based subjects that involve essays.
So back to the reading and writing.
Back to the reading and writing. So I did economics. Yeah. I did mathematics, economics, and politics as my A levels, which then set me up for the degree that I ultimately ended up doing at the LSE, which was BSc Econ in government. Yeah.
And how did that shape how you see the world?
Oh, that was cool. Going to the LSE, you suddenly realize that, you thought you were smart, but you're actually very average. You change the pool, right? Suddenly the pool is much more fabulous and smarter and sharper and everything else, and just more learned. And so I realized that, probably have to work a lot harder just to keep up in this environment. So that was kind of interesting, but brilliant friends, really, really good friends. Made along the way, and all very trying to do the right thing. Thinking about philosophy, I guess, was a big deal when we were growing up. And on a more practical side, I worked through school, so I worked at the Virgin Megastore, and they had this really cool thing where most people
was that the one in Piccadilly?
Oxford Street.
Oxford
No,
Street, okay.
No. At the time, the one in Piccadilly was Tower Records. It wasn't Virgin.
Oh yeah, it was Tower Records.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, no, Oxford Street, and they had this thing, Branson and crew had this thing that if you worked 19 hours a week, then you would get a free travel card. Okay, now a travel card in London is like, at the time it was worth like £2,000 a year or something.
And that's to be able to use the underground.
Underground and bus and everything. And so that job allowed me to basically pay for my travel. And back in the day, when I got accepted into the LSE, I also got a grant. So you used to get a grant. So my parents didn't have to pay any fees. And in fact, I think it was about £1,000 of just money, like a check for £1,000 you get given that you can spend on whatever you want. So
it's essentially a scholarship.
It's essentially a scholarship, although it was called a grant because it was from the government rather than from anyone else. But you didn't have to, I don't remember ever applying for the grant. It just kind of happened. So it was different times. Those things went away,
Well, those are the times when Britain became highly educated because everyone had 1, 2, 3 degrees.
That's correct.
Because of that systemic way of funding it.
And I wish we could get back to. We talk about some of the systemic inequality issues we face across. We've been talking about it in previous podcasts and so forth over in the US, but in the UK and so forth is, maybe one of my core beliefs comes out there, which is we have to be willing to look at education in a totally different way than the way we look at it today, which is educating workers to serve an economy. Like that has to be a very partial goal. Otherwise, I think systemic inequity will just get worse.
It fascinated me when I first came to the UK in my early 20s, when I was working with individuals at IBM who had history degrees, or they were majors in ballet or whatever it might be, or geography. And it was such a different framework. It was studying for the joy of studying and learning as a discipline, as opposed to the content you needed for your job. And there was huge value in that from what I could see. It taught the discipline of discipline. It taught the discipline of learning, of curiosity, as opposed to the subject being the means to the end that you needed for your job. And
Well, think about that. I mean, we saw that. I mean, if you go back to, our superstar performer years, right? Think about Credis years, okay? Then we never recruited off the basis of which course you did. We may have looked at which university you graduated from, maybe, which maybe wasn't right in retrospect. But we definitely didn't care if we didn't look for, are you a graduate of X or are you a graduate of Y? It was more the fact that you've got a degree from one of these places says that you can think for yourself, and there's a certain amount of self-starting,
yeah,
you have a self-starter nature. And I think my view is also, it's an interesting dialogue and debate maybe for a future session, is in the UK, I still feel that there's something about the fact that when people don't think about, when they apply for jobs, think about graduates when they're applying for jobs, that it's almost like they are further up Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the point at which they apply for that first job, because they're not worried about the need for that job to be able to give them healthcare, for example, right? As an example. And it's not, I don't want to make this it's not a political thing. It's just more, imagine what it does when you don't need to worry about your subsistence level of income and you don't have to worry about your subsistence level of health. It allows you to be pickier and choosier about what you're going to do with your life, right?
Yeah.
And I think here, generally in the US, I find that people seem to come to that realization maybe a little bit later in their careers.
Well, the way
The
it
system is
struck
set up
me,
differently.
yeah, the way it struck me is moving across from the UK to the US is there's a completely different level of fear around survival. So in the UK, because you have that basic level of subsistence and health, even though it sucks to lose your job and you wouldn't live well, it wouldn't be a good living at all. It isn't that same level of, am I actually going to survive? Whereas in the US, your job is tied so closely to your benefits. And here in California, you're at will, 2 weeks notice, all this kind of stuff, that nobody wants to take vacation. Nobody wants to be seen to be dispensable. Everyone wants to be always on, because there's this massive fear, if I lose my benefits, if I lose my job, I lose my benefits. And they're bloody expensive here as well. They're not easy to acquire.
So everyone creates fake facades, and then we wonder why we have such problems with authenticity, right? But then we create an industry to try to create the authenticity. so I mean, there's a certain amount of, it works.
Yeah.
I mean, the system works, but it is kind of like,
At what cost?
at what cost? Yeah.
Okay, before we go too deep down that rabbit hole, let's pull us back up. So talk me through your superstar performer years.
So oh God, so I'm such a bad role model. So when I finished university, I didn't do in the UK they used to call it the milk round, which is graduate recruitment. Don't know why they called it the milk round. That's just what it was called. But it's basically when companies shopped around and tried to take the best talent from colleges, and I didn't do any of that because I was too lazy. If I'm really honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I think all I really wanted to do was just get a quick job, earn a bit of money, and then go traveling around Europe a little bit. So I was working part time in the summer at a technology company. It was think of it like a pre-Dell company called Carrera Technology, and I was on tech support, so literally on tech support, and then moved up to do some work in their R&D. But basically, that's where I cut my teeth: customer services, technical support. And what at the time was disaster recovery and network. I mean, so this was when people used to crawl underneath desks to wire, put cables into back of machines, and networking looked like like a file server somewhere under a table. There was no cloud per se. Internet was very much first generation, and so disaster recovery looked like you have to get to, a company's server went down and you go there and you're literally ripping out disk drives and changing motherboards and that kind of thing. It's kind of where I cut my teeth. And then about after I came back from my traveling, joined Arthur Andersen. In fact, I was headhunted into Arthur Andersen, lady by the name of Jane Randall, who I'll be eternally grateful to, sort of found me, and I got recruited ultimately into what was at the time, same as you, Arthur Andersen Business Consulting. That's where our paths kind of met, even though we didn't really meet.
Not really. We knew of each other.
Yeah, but that was great. That was great.
Networking.
That to me was the real beginning of my superstar performer years. That was, advanced technology group, business process, people and change, mastering all of the consulting competencies that just give you the perspective of, travel, worked internationally. It's such a, and with, to be honest, at the time anyway, world-class training as well. I don't know that it exists in the same way anymore, but certainly at the time it was pretty impressive.
And you had a fairly profound interview experience.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got time for that one, but I'll share this. My final interview was with a gentleman by the name of William Casey, who was head of technology globally at the time. And I'm not going to tell the whole story because we haven't got time, but he basically asked me in my sort of final interview after I'd spoken to 15 other people, whatever it was that we had to do. He asked me about my 5-year goals, which obviously I didn't have at the time, and didn't even thought about at the time. And after going backwards and forwards over a week, I ended up sharing some 5-year goals with him that were more life-centric rather than just work-centric. And I believe it played a small factor in the career coach that I was assigned, my manager, if you like, who, as we know, was Paramjit. And that really shaped my career from that point forward. I felt there was like an invisible hand moving me to certain projects and certain orbits for the competencies that I was looking for. And then, ultimately left with Paramjit to start Quedis back in London all those eons ago, which obviously you were a part of as well. So without that intervention by William, none of this would have happened, So nothing but gratitude. And it's become a core part of our teachings at ThinqShift as well.
So then we had the early years at Quedis. What do you remember from those?
Stress.
From those days?
I remember having a lot of fun, but getting sick. It was a big job. It wasn't. I think it was not so much of a big job, but it was more just. It felt like we grew so fast, and we're responsible for so many people. And I think being the people person, I used to take on a lot of that negative emotional energy when people were struggling or hurting or sick or not performing or whatever. And I just don't think I had the tools in my belt at the time to manage the pain around that, and ultimately ended up getting pretty sick and in and out of hospital, passing out in the office. I think you came with me once to the hospital, I think. And
you definitely scared us.
That wasn't good. Those were not good times. But I will say that it was only, in retrospect, I do think that there's something to be said for moments of suffering. You do learn a lot from moments of suffering, assuming you make it through them. And I know for a fact that had it not been for those experiences, there's simply no way that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. No way. Because I think it's so easy when you're young, just to think you're invincible. You can do everything, and there's everything will be fine. If there's a problem, just push through it. Just work harder, study more, do more. And time has a way of catching up with you.
It was a real humbling experience.
Oh yeah, humbling and but also enlightening. Because what I realized was it probably doesn't help to measure yourself against the best qualities of other people. And that's kind of what I was doing. I used to measure myself against the best qualities of Paramjit and the best qualities of Ben and the best qualities of you and the best qualities of others. And this is exhausting and also actually unwinnable.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was the big realization that not only is it unwinnable, you're also doing damage because you're depriving the environment of the best gifts that you have to offer. And that's then not helping everyone else either. And that was a profound realization after a fair amount of sickness. My headaches went away, and life got a lot more pleasant after that. And we were more successful as a business. And that to me is, a very personal story as to why, sometimes we talk about this self-care stuff and looking after yourself, putting your mask on if you're in your early 20s or maybe even your early 30s, and you feel like you're just wonderful and this is your time to shine, and you can do anything because you're invincible, and then you say to yourself, you know what, be careful, because it may show up in terms of physical symptoms that you really don't want to have, and yeah, humbling experience. What can I say?
Yeah. And it's reminding me of the parallels we're seeing these days with Instagram and Facebook, that it's very easy to look at the outside of everybody else's life and what gets presented and compare it to the inside of how
Absolutely.
you feel. And that's a similar thing. It's not actually true. You've got to compare your insides to their insides, which you don't get to see. Because you can also present shiny outsides, but it's not necessarily the truth.
Well, it's almost always why, people who do the best job of creating a really, whatever you want to call it, happy, utopian, wonderful exterior tend to have the deeper issues with regards to, self-confidence,
Yeah.
self-efficacy, internal happiness, well-being. I mean, there is a correlation there, and it's a challenge, especially when people are building audiences from 9 years of age now through their social networks and so forth. And that's, there's pain in that if you don't know how to, well, if you're not appropriately equipped from an emotional, social learning point of view.
So Quetis, you headed up people, amazing growth, amazing results, amazing business that was built with people as the core from the inside out. That then took you to the US. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so we yeah, I ended up in the US to really help with a joint venture, which at the time was called Highland Worldwide, with North Highland here in the States. Obviously, Quetis in the UK. There was a French company called Orisis, a German company called Horvath and Partners, and I don't know. It was kind of like a United Nations of professional services companies. Go forth and try to build one of those. And to be honest, that was where I got to learn so much about how countries don't really want you to operate internationally. just the simple mechanics of visas, dealing with visas so people can travel different countries and work in different countries. I mean, it's taxation, how unpleasant it can be from a people point of view, how expensive it is to make all those things work, and just driving business across, in this case, 5 companies who were all very successful, but they were also all totally different, absolutely culturally different. I mean, literally French, German, Italian, English, American, and it's funny how no matter how at an individual level everyone was very understanding and trying to be open and so forth, at a company level, it's amazing how much the cultural stereotypes play out. I mean, they just play out, and what it did? It changed my perception of pace. It made me realize that when you want to try to do something that requires many cultures coming together, you have to accept that it cannot be done fast. And for me, it was things that I thought would take a month took 4 months. Things that I took should take a week would take 2 months. And it's a very different perspective on how well are you doing your job, how well are you surviving. Now, I think that's also true for some of the challenges we face as a country right now. These things we're trying to solve, they are not quick fixes. They are long-term marathon running type fixes. And it made me relate to that. But then ultimately, that process resulted in Jay being, my son was born here in the States when I was in 2007, before I came back to England, which was a blessing. We weren't sure we'd be able to have kids, so that was great. Totally unexpected. And kind of really gave me my affinity to the US, really. That was that's the reason why we came back to Atlanta, of all places, afterwards. It was when the opportunity came and we chose to allow ourselves to be acquired by North Highland. It made sense for me to be one of the people that came stateside as part of that. And so a few years after that, we came back again. We did the relocation, Vicki. It was funny. We did the relocation from the first conversation to actually having moved in 6 weeks.
That is remarkable, Vips. The amount of effort involved, that is quite remarkable. I remember.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
No.
I wouldn't recommend.
Stressful. Yeah.
But I would also say that it's the kind of thing that you could take 6 months or a year to do, and it would still be stressful. That stress would just be extended over a longer period. So it was like ripping the Band-Aid off. But we had to sort out Jay's school, and Carla had to leave her job. I mean, there was pain in there.
Yeah. Let alone the bank accounts and the house. And
Oh my God, you just forget about it at that point. You just spend. You just spend, and you just, I think it's the kind of thing you can do with high yellow mentality like I have, like a high risk tolerance mentality. But if you're someone who needs to plan and have their T's crossed and I's dotted, you just have to go, it's going to be okay. I'll get looked after. It will be fine somehow. And, many people can't do that. It's a hard thing to do, And I'm lucky that Carla's also like that. Otherwise, we'd never be able to do it.
Yeah.
That brings us to the US, I guess.
US, yeah. So tell us about the journey then and the start of ThinqShift.
Oh, wow. So, I did my 2 years at North Island afterwards, and it was great. And to me, North Island was very much it was more of a, I don't think North Island ever got the best out of me after that transition, because part of it was I was so culturally invested in what was Quedis, and the integrated company wanted Quedis to be something else. And North Island UK was had to be something different. That was hard for me at a personal level, just because it had so much of my identity tied into it.
Well, it was your baby.
It was my baby.
Yeah.
So I was probably less than the model employee, I guess, from that point of view. For North Island at the time, but but it was also, for me, it was also just reorientating to a different country, because now we'd moved. It wasn't just a gig. We'd moved, and it was just hard. I didn't have my friends. I didn't have my network. Didn't have my clients. Didn't have, all the people that I trusted. They just weren't there, And, just establishing roots in a different place was challenging against the backdrop of not really enjoying what I was doing at the time. So I did my 2 years, left, the right thing for everybody. I left, and it was like, okay, I'm going to take a year off. I'm just going to think about what I want to do. And I remember it vividly. I started reaching out to clients that I'd worked with, because by this point, I'd had about 20 years in the world of business transformation. And I was like, I wonder how many of these actually worked, And as I started talking to clients, just face to face, most of them had moved on as well. The question was simple. Did your organizations transform to the level and to the extent at which you believed they would at the point at which you were undertaking these projects? And the answer was basically 5 out of 25 said yes. Okay, which for me was like, oh dear, that's not a good way of looking at your career, your 20 years. You spent all this time, and so many of them haven't worked. And it turns out that statistically, if you look at the research and you look at the HBR articles, and business transformation is just tough, and very few truly succeed, and less than 13% generally succeed. So then I guess my average was higher than 13%. So that was good. But it wasn't, it was more of a, so what makes the ones work? What makes some of them work and most of them not work, if you like? Is there any patterns there? And the sample was simple, and it wasn't like, I didn't do a robust academic study, but I just did it based on the people and the clients that I'd worked with over time. And as I did those interviews, what seemed to pop, or at least what seemed to pop for me, was if you don't shift the mindsets and behaviors of the people at the top, typically, but the key influencers, then it doesn't actually matter how much money you spend on technology, process change, whatever, the environment will recoil. At the root of cultural change is the behavior shifting that needs to occur in the few. But then that was, well, is that even doable? So then I went and spent some time with a neuroscientist down in Florida who I got introduced to from a friend. And I was just learning about how much you can actually rewire. So the concepts which we now talk about as neuroplasticity, how much can you actually rewire, and what's the process of rewiring the way you think? And can you really do it? And what does it look like? And it was through that process that I realized, wow, it's actually, you can. But A, you have to want to, and B, you have to put some serious effort into it. But we can maybe shepherd that process for some people, particularly at different stages in their careers. Like, what it takes to be a superstar performer is different from an awesome manager, different to a top-notch executive. And then this kind of idea sprung that, well, we could sort of package that and make that a business enterprise in itself. And that might be worth doing, because then just think of the hundreds of millions that get spent on these things that are never going to work, even though the logic tells you it is. And simple stuff like people will do these like revisioning. They'll put these new strategies out, new 5-year plans. They'll do the full, vision to mission to strategy to planning to execution cycles. And then what they'll do is the CEO or the president will still trust the very people that made them successful in the past. So these people are wired to do things the way they've done them before, and they're indebted to them. So you can spend as much money as you like. The organization never pivots because those people never shift because they have no reason to, because they've been programmed to believe it works. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying, I sat down and started thinking about, okay, what would the business model of something like that need to look like? And that's why we came up with this concept of leadership services and why it's so different from how most coaching companies tend to look at it. And the rest you can go and look on the website, I guess. But that ultimately became the idea of ThinqShift. And then it was more about, well, I don't trust myself to do it on my own. I need Vicki because she keeps me on the right track. And I need someone like a Gordon, because without someone like a Gordon, we'll probably go bankrupt because I won't look after the money enough and so forth. And for me, it was, okay, we're going to do it the right way with the right principles. You're going to get the right people at the beginning, and that's it. And, it's okay to be small as long as you're being impactful. And let's focus on being impactful and helping create fabulous people into fabulous leaders, and then the rest will figure itself out. And it does seem to do so remarkably. It does seem to do so remarkably. It certainly leads to a happier life.
So I would love you to tell the story of how you've come up with your personal mission for 7 fabulous people.
I think I have to do the Cliff Notes version, Vicki, because it might take an hour otherwise. This is a very personal story, and it really goes back to my mother passing away. She died of breast cancer in, tearing up a little bit, about a decade ago. So it was 2000 and, gosh, I'm blanking on years, 2009. And what I did was, she literally, it was very aggressive breast cancer. She died in a very short period of time. But I remember vividly, just before she died, she took me aside and said to me and my father that, you need to take Vipul to India to do the Sartik because his soul's not at rest. and then she died literally a few minutes later. She passed away. And I've not been great at embracing the Indian side of my culture through my growing up, because I grew up English, I guess. Yeah. But so in my head, it was, oh God, I'm going to have to go to India to do some stupid ritual. And Indians seem to have a ritual for everything. I was very glass half empty about this, as opposed to glass half full about this at the time. But the long and short of it was a couple of years later. And it's one of those weird things you can only do at a certain time of year. It has to be in the lunar cycle immediately after Diwali, which gives you 15 days to go. And because my mother passed away on the 4th day, you had to do it on the 4th day, and you had to go to some sacred place where sacred rivers converge and the water levels drop to a certain level to expose land. And it's just, you can't make this stuff up, other than the fact that there's 2 places in India you can go and do this ceremony, apparently. So I went to do this thing. It was 2 years later, I think. It was 2011. I went, and so I went to this place, and I went to our villages where my parents grew up, and they are literally villages. And I met our priest, like our guru, my Maharaj, as they're called. And I understood the symbolism of this. The basic idea was you'd go to this place, and we did, and there's a fire, of course. There's 100,000 other people, but you find your little spot, you light a fire, and essentially, what happens is that you go through a very reflective exercise of the things that you remember about your parents and your grandparents. And the essential idea is for you to surface qualities, characteristics that you liked or disliked or you found memorable. And this Maharaj would help you sort of place these things to areas of your life. You've had that in your family for 3 generations, starting with your great grandmother, this kind of stuff. And it's, I don't know how valid it is. It certainly put me in a very reflective place. And I did come out of it So the idea is to walk away from this thing with closure. You don't, from that point forward, the wisdom of my parents' lifetimes or my mother's life basically gets distilled, it gets passed down the bloodline, and then that soul can go and reincarnate, and I can start my journey to becoming an elder, right? That's the basic idea. Because,
And you had no idea how long you were going to be there or what was going to happen to you when you
well, that was
left.
just the initial journey, and then we were leaving. We'd done on that. That's a 1 day thing, like 4 or 5 hours. We were leaving, and I went to an ashram. I was ferried off in a boat to an ashram. I didn't know how long I was going to be there. Ashram was right there on the banks, and that's where I met what I'd now affectionately call my 9 Jedi. And that was, I had no idea. I didn't even know I was going there. And it was one of those, how long will I be here? You will be here for as long as you need to be here. What are you here to do? You will discover what it is you're here to do. It was one of those, if you want straight answers, it's terrible, terrible, terrible place to be. But what it was really was, it's a retreat, I guess, is the way in English you could call it. And these guys, they would coach. It was a combination of coaching and meditation, a little bit of stretching, cooking for the poor. But they would come and talk to you for an hour, hour and a half, and then disappear and leave you with something really profound. But in retrospect, so when I did that thing with my mother, it was more just in our family. And then what this person did, or this group did, is in my head anyway, the way I remember it was they made me go through my memories from 0 to 5, 5 to 15, 15 to 30, that kind of thing. I was remembering, the best analogy I can give is I was remembering things with a kind of clarity as if you go to a really dark desert, if you go to the middle of Arizona and you look up and you can see all sorts of stars that you can't see if you're living in LA, right? But it was kind of like that. I was remembering events and people and all sorts of stuff from my life I'd just forgotten about, particularly my maths teacher. But that process, ultimately, I got to about day 4 and a half, and it was like, I know why I'm here now. It just had an epiphany that the common thread that seems to exist is I am just good, and my talents are best served by helping really good people go and do good things more than they would do otherwise. And it was quite hard for me because part of that was acknowledging that it wasn't about making average people good enough. It was about it was kind of hard, right? It feels almost elitist. And I didn't like how that sat, but I seem to have gifts that tend to get the best out of really good people. And I tend to get frustrated with people who are not that good in the first place, if you like. And that sounds slightly obnoxious, but that's kind of how it felt. So anyway, to cut a long story short, they then bring out this kind of idea of, I guess, karma. This idea that the more you have to give, the more you have to give in order to earn this is my language now, not theirs, to earn the kind of credits through life that make it a worthwhile existence, because the idea behind life is in some way, shape or form to leave the planet in a slightly better place than you found it in some small way. And because Hindus believe in reincarnation, the idea of coming back as a cockroach doesn't really appeal too much. So the idea of kind of coming back, for me, it was quite nice because it gave me some urgency, some sense of, there's a reason to do good in this life. And whether you believe it or not, it almost doesn't matter, but it was a nice theory or a nice concept. So I get back from this experience. I know the answer, but I haven't documented it yet. And then I remember New Year's Day after I got back, and I was like, I got to clear this out because my head's hurting. It's been 3 or 4 or 5 months of percolation, and I sat down and I said, okay, I got to figure out what this means. I need a metric behind this. I need some way of crystallizing it. And I remember sitting down in front of after a couple of failed attempts, sat down in front of a spreadsheet. And I said, well, okay, how many people turned up to my mother's funeral? Because she was one of these fascinating people, had lots of followership, despite never being, like, she was just a leader of people rather than a business leader or anything like that. She was a housewife, effectively. And it was, whatever that number was, it was, almost 2,000 people. And then what I did was I remember saying, well, I need some kind of multiplying factor. Like, what's the pay it forward factor? I'm pretty sure I put down 5 or 6. I can't remember what it was. I think it was 5. And then I remember vividly saying, well, okay, I can't do a goal seek just yet. because I remember that about 40 people would probably turn up to my funeral if I was to die on that day. So it's like 1,980 something. That's a big gap. A multiplication factor of 5. And then I realized that for Excel's goal seek function to work, you had to give it a time, like over what period. There's a number that was missing. So I had to like plumb in like an estimated date of death.
Oh gosh.
Rather morbid, right? But I had to give it a time period. Then hit the goal seek and out popped 6.84. And I remember 6.84 vividly. And that became, you've got to find and help 7 fabulous people each year to go and do some good in the world, or at least pay it forward 5 times. And if you can do that, then you'll be happy. That's it. 6.84 became 7 fabulous people. And 7 fabulous people became, I guess, ThinqShift for me. And the idea is kind of baked in. And I guess there's a reason why we're doing a podcast called Be Fabulous, right? I mean, it all comes back to that for me. So yeah,
that's great.
That's the story.
Yeah, powerful story. I love hearing it. Every time I hear it, it brings chills to me. I absolutely love it.
It's very cool, and I think what I would say is, the most amazing thing is, sure, I still get stressed out from time to time, and I get tired and get frustrated or whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm happy. Work doesn't feel like work. It's just being, and that's very cool. That's very cool. It doesn't mean that sometimes I wonder it doesn't mean the competitive side of me's gone. I'm still pretty competitive. I still want to win. Still want to do cool things. Still want to, but deep down, yeah, all right. You win a bit more, win a bit less. Happy, and I think that is a very cool thing.
It is. Yeah, I share that. I always say I never have to work another day in my life, because what I do is not work to me anymore.
That's right.
It's what I'm supposed to do on the planet. It's the magic.
Yeah. I think people see that, though. They see that when they work with us. They feel it.
Yeah.
Maybe not see it. They feel it.
Yeah, and they can feel our purpose of doing something real, not just for money. So Vips, last question. If you had to go back and talk to your younger self.
Oh, I wish you wouldn't do this one.
What would you tell younger Vips? 7-year-old Vips, what would you tell him?
I find that so hard, because I wonder if those things are the very things that if you didn't have, would change who you became, if you know what I mean. But I guess I'd probably say is just learn patience a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. I can be quite impatient because my brain seems to work quite fast. And if I could go back, I would definitely say be more patient and maybe a little bit less impulsive and a little bit more intentional. I learned about being intentional probably in my 30s. And I wish I'd learned it in my 20s.
Oh, Vips, this was magical. Thank you so much. Are we ready for a Vicki challenge?
Go for it.
All right, guys. So your Vicki challenge for the week is, what would you tell your younger selves? Take 90 minutes, get a pen and paper, and without giving it too much thought, just go back and think to yourselves, what would you tell your younger selves about the way life has turned out? And that's it. And with that, have a great week and be fabulous. Thanks again, Vips.
Thank you.